Welcome back to Hooah Presents. On this episode, we have Bart on the show. We'll be having a real conversation with a real veteran about real stuff we're all really going through. Bart, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks for coming out.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah. So, how have you been?
I've been well. Thank you for inquiring. And you?
I've been well.
That warms my heart.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. What are you doing now, Bart? What do you do as a professional? What are you doing?
I'm a trooper. I'm a National Guardsman.
Right. Right on. You've been doing that for...
I joined the National Guard in 2006.
Okay.
I was regular Army during the Cold War. And then for approximately 20 years, I was just a normal civilian. After we got attacked with some delay, I came back. Yeah. I was in the tanks before. We don't have any tanks in Utah. I joined the MI.
Now you're in, so that's what you do now. Now you're an intelligence guy. You've been around, you've done a bunch of different stuff too. We don't have to dig into if you don't like.
Whatever, I'm an open source. I won't tell you any secrets.
Well,
I have no Snowdens in me.
Good man.
No bird dolls.
Good man.
Yeah.
Good man.
So I was in Afghanistan with you for 18 months altogether as a trooper, doing intel stuff, interrogations mostly. And then I came back. I taught those skills for a year, again with you. You were there. And then I went back as a contractor to a different area and did counterintelligence screenings and reports for another 2 years. So I spent 3.5 years in Afghanistan altogether. And then since coming back, I've been mostly engaged in Africa, doing translation. And we are everywhere in Africa, and Africa is an interesting continent. There is a lot going on there. And it's very interesting.
Very cool.
So I like it.
Excellent. Oh, cool, man. Well, it's very good to have you on the show.
I like interacting with a bearded man. Yes. I find it intriguing in ways I can't recount.
That's good. Thanks. Yeah. And grunts and stuff. That's good. Hey, not to just jump right into talking about some stuff, but we earlier today a topic was brought up talking a little bit about the homeless problem.
Indeed.
And institutionalization. And I wonder if I could not just pick your mind a little bit for some of your thoughts.
Pick away.
Yeah. So what are some of your thoughts regarding the homeless population and the increase? It seems very significant.
Yeah.
Increase in homelessness in the last several years. Give us a breakdown. Give us a rundown a little bit.
I am not an expert on homelessness, but I will tell you my life experience with the problem.
That's what I'd like to hear.
When I was little, I'm 52. So growing up in the 60s, 70s, early 80s, there were no homeless people anywhere. You never saw anybody on the street begging. You did not. Not in Utah, not anywhere. I mean, if you go outside the state, maybe if you went to New York or something, you would see panhandlers. But I can tell you here in the Salt Lake Valley, zero. None.
Yeah.
Today, you can go any corner, anywhere, any ville in the state, outside the state, and there are literally villages of homeless people. You go to Seattle, and they are encamped. Go to the West Coast, and they are a force. A major force in many places, in strength. Here in Utah, not so much, but you see them everywhere. Now, it's not that there are vast hordes of these people, but they are evident, right? Corner after corner. Yeah. They stake out their corner. It's like property, and that's where they beg from. And they have signs and whatnot. So the question is, how come? Where did all these people come from?
Yeah.
Canada? Hawaii? No. They came out of the deinstitutionalization, which happened under Reagan, where we used to have psychiatric centers throughout the United States, okay? And if you were a psych case, you went there. And you were institutionalized until you were no longer a psych case. Some of those people were permanent.
Yeah.
Right? So you've heard of committing people.
Yeah.
Well, that rarely happens today. People are rarely committed. But back in the day, people were committed. And I would argue with reason they were committed.
Yeah.
Most of the homeless people in the preliminary research that I've done, which is preliminary, I'm not a PhD in the subject, nor do I claim any great expertise, but I have researched a bit, and something along the order of 85 to 90% of people are psych cases.
Yeah.
They are addicts, they are alcoholics, they have serious mental issues, and they are roaming the streets. They're roaming the streets, not just panhandling, but defecating out in the urban sprawl, sometimes victims of violence, perpetrating violence, all manner of criminality. They are a menace to themselves. They're a menace to society in large part.
Yeah.
During the Reagan recession, which approached 10% unemployment, more than the last 2008 recession, contrary to what is always perpetrated about it being the greatest recession since the Great Depression. Not true. The Reagan recession had a greater unemployment rate for a short time. During that time is when you started to see families of homeless people suddenly out and about because they were suddenly unemployed. And you saw that. There was even a little television show that was put out for a short time about this family that was suddenly on the road, right? So there's a great deal of empathy, there's a great deal of sympathy generated because this image suddenly became encamped in people's heads that a normal American family could suddenly find themselves without a home. That happened. It happened. But it was a blip. That is not really the case today. There are families, there are children, there are people that find themselves in those situations. But statistics don't bear out that it's the majority. It's a very small, perhaps 10% of people that are, quote, quote, normal who find themselves without shelter suddenly. Of course, everybody feels sympathy for those individuals. Everyone feels sympathy for them, and they should. However, the homeless, I have very little empathy for. I truly do. People who are out there who choose that lifestyle, and by and large, they choose it, even though they're mentally deranged. They refuse to be to accept help. You have in any major city in the United States, even during the height of winter, when people actually are freezing to death on the street, you have homeless people which refuse to go to a bed, a warm bed and a shower, because they have to register themselves, they have to get in the system in some way, and they have this fear that somehow they're going to be controlled and they're going to be whatever, because they're deranged. Obviously they're deranged. They have problems.
Yeah, you know, I think some point that I think is a problem right now with the homeless population is that these institutions that once were aren't there now, and
right.
Now jailing systems are picking up the program, and a lot of the mental health program is about drugs, and so it's like here, come for a fee, come here. And for a fee, come there, and the local governments are picking up these fees on a here and there basis with guys who are coming from whatever it was that led them to the street. You know, whether loss of job, something impacted them, they didn't know how to deal with it.
Right.
They end up with these poor coping skills. They end up drinking, doing stuff like this that ends up bringing them down the wash. And now they hit the bottom, and they end up at these shelters in these locations. I've walked down, I've been around these shelters, man, a lot, and I'll tell you that their exposure to the things that are corrupting them is so much higher than their exposure to anything that would bring correction.
Sure.
And that stems right from the street. Right into the jail cells. It's the same thing. They've got exposure, and the camaraderie that they're receiving amongst each other is superior to the camaraderie that they receive from the people that could actually bring some correction to their situation. And so it ends up being a vicious cycle of destruction that it's harder and harder to get away from, I think, for them, because they're intoxicated, you're on drugs, then you're on medications, that when you're on these medications, you need to be with a therapist that is like helping you walk through all your problems. Instead, you're taking the drugs and you're going out and you're walking through your problems with a bunch of other guys that are all messed up too.
Yeah.
And so you're only increasing your threshold to the problems that normally, in normal situation, when things go wrong, the problem causes you to discover answer to the problem. I get hurt. The pain tells me, oh, you need to give attention to this, right?
Yeah.
I get emotionally hurt. The pain tells me this problem, this depression tells me I need to deal with these things. But instead, you're entering out into a world where guys are saying, here, the world sucks. And that's all there is to it. And so here, take this hit of dope and see how you feel.
Right.
And you feel great. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, geez, that's the real answer right there.
Right.
And your mind, I mean, these poor guys, that's what ends up happening. I think, they end up, now they come from people who maybe made bad choices to victims of society, where that's not where we want to be. Like you're saying, we all have this sympathy, right? And we all really care and want everybody to be doing well, right? Because we want security for ourselves and for our communities, and we want to be able to have good conversations with each other. We want good things.
Indeed.
So I think that you're onto something and bringing up what brought the upheaval of it, the spike in it statistically.
Yeah.
But I think that what we currently have will not suffice to, if we say, okay, well, let's look at our institutions and say that they're what we need to use. I think that if we look at that, we don't get a valid picture of what is successful, because we're not currently set up to be able to bring success to that.
Yeah, it's probably one of the few areas that I would say the government needs to be involved. I'm generally an anti-government guy.
Yeah.
I think they tend to mess up everything.
Yeah.
However, this is an area that probably needs an overarching federal hand under a deft leadership that could, I think these people actually, they need to be taken off the streets by and large. They're not going to go voluntarily. Right. They have to be interned. They have to be taken off their drugs, taken off the meds. They have to be appropriately dealt with and given coping skills so that they can either, some kind of determination needs to be made. Is this person really cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and they need to stay interned?
Yeah.
And or are they a threat to themselves, to others? If so, can they be helped? Are they criminals or not? But regardless, they need to be taken off the streets.
Yeah.
It's a blight. It's a blight. If you go to Monterey, if you go to Seattle, if you go to Hawaii, pristine beaches, and these guys are everywhere. They are doing any and all activities in public, and it is not cool. It is not what the taxpayer pays for, and I don't have sympathy for it. I do not have sympathy for it, and I think all this this outreach that people demand, the home, let's feed these people, give them money. Subsidizing this lifestyle is not an answer. It is not an answer. Even though you feel sympathy, you feel empathy, it will not go away with that kind of thing. Yeah. It will not go away, and it does not help that person. It really does not. Yeah. It's a false feel-goodism for the individual or for the group. Yeah, you can go down and you can work in the homeless shelter. You can do the soup kitchen or whatever is there. It's not solving the issue. Feeding these guys turkey on Thanksgiving is not solving the issue. Yeah. It is not. So I would be for federal program administered by the states, by competent individuals to reinstitutionalize the vast majority of homeless people nationwide, give them proper care, make sure that they are taken care of, that they until there can be functional people, and some may not. But to separate them from the criminal prison population, separate them from this cycle that you described. Yeah, I think this is since the 80s we have been doing this. It doesn't work.
Yeah, the the church does a lot, and here in Salt Lake and throughout Utah, but here in Salt Lake City, the church does a lot to offer program. They fund shelters. They're a major contributor to the assistance programs, right? And there are a lot of really lovely programs for people, especially if they're really prepared and trying to get out of their situation, to be able to get housing, to be able to get on their feet,
Sure.
to be able to get their heads out of their asses long enough to take a breath
Shocking.
and figure out what's really going on.
Indeed.
But not everybody's in that situation.
No.
What you're saying, this need to reinstitutionalize people or bring them up to snuff on, hey man, here's like some social norm stuff that you should probably, not just probably, but you must get involved with. You need to be right in walking around here on the street. You need to be rehabilitated.
Sure.
I think is the answer to that.
Well, some people are going to resist that. There are people that are actually one loop shy, right? And they are not going to respond.
Yeah.
And those people need to be interned because they're dangerous. They're dangerous to themselves. They're dangerous to others. And they can't just be roaming the streets because they are a prime target for criminality.
Yeah.
If nothing else,
Yeah.
they're a prime target. And it's immoral, in my view, to allow a population of people to wander freely who are deranged,
Yeah.
either because of intoxicants and dependence on chemicals and or because of some biological malfeasance in the brain.
Well, I think even educationally, like, I've had, there's a lot of really smart people out there. Like I said, I spend a lot of time with people out in the shelters and around the shelters, and I'll tell you, man, they're really intelligent people, but they're not correct in so many ways, and I think that too is a threat to them and to their well-being, and like you say, it increases their the potential for criminality because they're susceptible to fallacy. They're susceptible to being taught and told lies and believing in on that, and so then acting in and on that. It's kind of, I think, that lack of education, that's a problem that comes all the way across the board though for us when it comes to potential risks for like terror, people who get involved in doing terrorist acts or criminal acts, other criminal acts, stealing and stuff like this. Not being up to snuff on what we all know, the common understanding of reality with, that we share, the grounds that we can walk on together, being further and further away from that, I think also is a problem. And I think that the drugs and the intoxicants, those things are an exponent to the problem. But I don't think that they're just the problem themselves. We fight a lot a war on drugs. We criminalize it and we attack people who are using it and doing it. Yet at the same time, I could go down to these streets and I can point out every single one of the dealers, and you can watch them show up early in the morning and go home at a regular hour, and they go home and they take care of their families on the drug money that they've been making,
exploiting
these people who are messed up and just continuing that process.
Sure, and if you know that, why doesn't the police know that? Why are they not reacting to it?
That's a question that I have.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could be a prime informant.
Right.
Right.
Right. It's just like that.
So if it's your job as a Salt Lake PD guy who's out there on the beat literally every day.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
How can you not know that?
Right.
And why do you not act?
Right. It's
a good question,
right?
Very
good question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
question.
It really is.
And I hear you. So we are in concurrence.
Yes, I think so. I think so. Well, let's here's the hopes and prayers that something right happens. I think that they're going to be doing some changes. I read somewhere in one of the Salt Lake, one of the state bulletins, something came out about a reform to the way that they're doing things right now. So we'll see. Over the next couple of years.
It needs leadership and it needs a long-term strategy.
Yeah.
Too much of what we see in governmental policy is Band-Aid.
Yeah.
It's Band-Aid, and it solves nothing, but it's feel-goodism.
Yeah.
The worst part of liberal democratic thinking is Band-Aid mentality.
Yeah.
And emotion triumph over reason. And I'm contrary to that line of thought.
Yeah.
I believe in practical approach.
I think that is the right thing. It's not wrong to be emotional, and it's not wrong to have
but you can't let it
feels.
blind you. You can't let it blind you to reality.
Exactly. It's just like we're saying where if you get hurt, you recognize that this needs attention.
Absolutely.
Also, if this feels good, we recognize this is something that we ought to do.
Right.
But like you're saying, you got to be practical about it so that it has a long-lasting and a real effect instead of a Band-Aid that turns to a nasty sore.
Yeah.
Right. Throw a Band-Aid on something.
Infection.
And it gets worse. Right.
Put on the antiseptic. It's going to hurt. It's going to cure you, baby.
Right. Exactly.
There you go.
Right.
I'm all about it.
That's it.
Well, I can tell you what. There are entrenched interests, particularly in cities on the coast, that do not want to address that. You go up to Seattle. I don't know if you've ever been there, but you can see the tent cities, literally cities of these homeless folks, and they are not doing well to each other or to society. And there's this idea that because they are, quote, victims, or because they are indigent and deserving of some kind of thing, this emotionalism overpowers everything, and it solves nothing. It only does. They don't realize there's basic economic principles that guide much of my life. And one of those economic principles is anything that you legalize, anything that you subsidize monetarily, you're going to have more of. Guaranteed. It is an economic principle. If you pass a law saying that X is okay, whatever that X is, you're going to see more of it.
Yeah.
If you contrary-wise, if you pass a law against something, if you tax something, if you criminalize something, you are going to see less of it. Now the question is, what do you do? Which do you do? In what measure do you do that? But the problem is that when your heart bleeds and you start institutionalizing, you start decriminalizing, you start socializing and normalizing aberrant behavior, sure as the proverbial whatever you want to say, you're going to have more of it. You are going to have more of it.
Yeah.
And is that what you want? You have to think in the long term. Do we want more homelessness? And the question is, well, yes, I think we do. Why don't we make it okay to set up a tent village in our town? And why don't we make it okay for people to panhandle? And why don't we actually provide free food and housing for these people? Why don't we do that so that we can get more of it? Because we like homelessness. Now that's bizarre thinking, is it not?
Yeah.
And yet that is exactly what happens.
Well, what do you think? Do you think that so to me it sounds like a freedom-mindedness too. It comes into play. So let me play this thought line of thinking to the best that I can. So we it's my right to do this. I want to be free. I don't want to live on the grid. And I don't want to live by your rules.
Sure.
I don't want your laws. I didn't want asked to be born into your laws.
Sure.
Why should I have to comply with the laws of your community and your society?
Right.
Why do I need to care about that Constitution?
Sure, it's a libertarian approach, and it's very appealing to the average American because we're grown up on this idea of liberty and equality. These are our founding principles that guide everything in our thinking. But whenever we take either of these two principles to their extreme, we are in the realm of chaos, my friend. We are in the realm of chaos, the nasty, brutish, and short life of the barbarian. This is where it leads. Because if I reject governmental policies, if I reject the rule of law is the success of culture. It is where all of prosperity comes from. As soon as I reject that in any way, shape, or form, and if it is taken en masse by a significant group of the population, we are in the jungle. We're back in the jungle. We will, literally. That's where we will be. We will destroy our society from within. So we no longer have the great frontier where if you want to be a mountain man, you can go out and live in the mountains with the Indians or by yourself. It does not exist. It is not a reality in the lower 48. Now you can go to Alaska, maybe you can find someplace, but you can't find that in the United States.
Gosh, that makes me think of something interesting. So you and I have both sworn oaths.
Indeed.
Our oaths are to protect the Constitution against all threats, foreign and domestic.
That's right.
What comes to my mind when I see corruption of my people under my Constitution?
Right.
Is what is the threat here? Who's the threat?
Sure.
And it makes me think of the foreign. So illegal immigration, or the foreign persons, even legal or illegal, that come in, they're gangs that are controlling the drug distribution, the perpetuation of the criminality, of the drug addiction. And you look at it, and we had Russians, we've had Mexicans and Hondurans, Colombians. All of these
the triads from Hong Kong.
All of these states who had issue with us and with our country, right? Who you might even say enemy, right? These threats. Now they have foothold in our country, selling their drugs and perpetuating their criminal behavior and their ideology unto our youth. And our susceptible persons, and this brings, like I say, I can sit down there and I'll point out all of the freaking drug dealers down there, man, and you don't find but a onesie twosie here and there, and they're usually the go-between guy who's actually a natural born citizen of our country. So I wonder, if it's, and we can go back in some time with that and look at the criminal element that imports itself into the country and how they disrupt the social system. Real deal, threat.
Yeah, it's a threat. I don't believe in the conspiracy theory. I don't think the governments of Mexico or Russia or Colombia are sending these guys in a covert way.
Right.
We have a market, and our market drives it. We have demands. So our people have a demand for intoxicants, and somebody's going to supply that.
Yeah.
Happened under Prohibition. It's happened since the beginning of time. So if there's a market for something, somebody's going to fill that market. It's just a matter of policing and making something not desirable in a given culture. So you can do that in multiple ways. One is the hard approach, where you have a totalitarian approach, and like in Singapore, right? Singapore has no problem with drugs. Of course, this is a place where if you chew gum, you can get 5 strokes of the cane, right? And they get the bamboo cane, they get the guy wail on you in the back, right? Littering, it's an immaculate city. You lose liberty when you have that kind of approach. We could clear crime. Mussolini made the train runs on time. He got rid of the mafia. That's how all the mafia came to the United States. It's because Mussolini expelled them all. That's how we got our Italian mafia, because of the fascists in the 30s. So certainly you can do that, 20s and 30s. Certainly you can do that. But you lose liberty. So for Americans, we choose to have an element of chaos in our society. That's why we have high gun deaths. That's why we have elements of criminality that are not comparable with Europe, because we have this culture, this dynamic culture that breeds a bit of chaos because of this libertarian impulse that is inbred from the founding fathers in our society. And sure as can be, as we incorporate disparate peoples from all over the globe who come from cultures that are not traditionally Northern European, right? Or European at all, not Christian, not under the Greco-Hebrew Roman cultural norm, but come from Buddhist, or come from Confucius, or come from Taoist, or come from Muslim backgrounds, which are totally, totally different. Their ethics, their culture is in many ways very, very different. So sure, that's going to have an impact. Is that a criminal impact? Not necessarily. but it is an impact, and it's an impact that affects all kinds of life. So,
But is that impact corruptive of our ways?
well, it can be. I don't know that I would say, in large part, no. I would not blame crime in the United States on foreigners. I would not say that's to be borne out.
Yeah.
Certainly, there's an element, there's a percentage, but the vast majority of crime in the United States is perpetuated by native-born Americans.
Well, I wouldn't. I'm not necessarily trying to say that foreign criminality is the criminality of the country. What I suggest as concern is foreign criminality recognizing our propensity towards criminality and coming in and capitalizing on it.
Yeah,
creating,
certainly.
furthering corruption in our
Yeah,
country.
people come in, our laws, for example, the Russians. After the Soviet Empire broke up,
Yeah.
there was all manner of Russian emigres who came to the United States because suddenly it was allowed. You could immigrate, and you came to the bright, shiny city on the hill. Well, if you have a diabolic mind, if you have a propensity towards disrespect for the law, and you come from a system which is extremely rigid, and anything that you do is punishable by death or the gulag in Siberia, and you come to the United States where we have a system which believes you have to be proven guilty, you're assumed to be innocent. So it's easy to exploit. And if you have all kinds of technical skills, you have a good education, you're a smart guy, but you are you don't have any morals, you're a sociopath, sure, you can exploit that. You can exploit it. Absolutely you can.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to be a foreigner to do that. But if you've been raised in that system, which has honed you, right? All the Russian gangs that came out of the Soviet Union, the Chechens, all those other groups, right? They were honed to a fine edge. They're barbarians in many ways, right? They lack the markings of civilization because they abhor civilization. What they are is they're predators. They are, as Miss Clinton said, super predators, right? Regardless of race, ethnicity, or whatever. These people that we allow. But we permit that in our society because we value freedom for the masses to such a high level, right? We value that.
Right.
We choose the chaos, the criminality, to some extent, because the way to eliminate that is too harsh. We do not want to be governed by tyrants. Mm-hmm. So when someone says, "Yeah, I'll come in, I'll impose order," absolutely they can do that. But sure as can be, you're going to lose your liberty in the process.
So then, is an answer to that an American answer to that that we all sling our gun belts and put on our boots and as communities stand up for our rights, and when we catch this behavior, we can take care of it ourselves? No,
I don't think vigilantism is the cure. Contrary to the popular perception, crime in the United States has plummeted.
Sure.
It has plummeted
This is true.
in the last 40 years.
This is true.
Every year, on average, up until just recently, violent crime in the United States was being reduced by 10%. So the level of criminality, even though our population is 320 million today, the level of criminality by percentage is vastly reduced. It's vastly reduced, and it's been ghettoized, literally ghettoized, so that you can live in Chicago where there are 3,000 shootings per annum, right? And there's 1,000 people killed per annum or more, 2,000 depending, I forgot the stats. But you can live in Chicago with that horrific percentage and you can be totally untouched by it because your neighborhood is not affected. Or you can live on the south side and you're touched by it every day because crime has been centralized. It's been for lack of a better term, ghettoized into certain cities, into certain localities within cities. So here in Salt Lake, you go to West Valley, right? West Valley, which is not like South Central.
No.
But West Valley has a crime problem.
Yeah.
If you cross a fictional line, that crime problem largely disappears.
Yeah.
Right? It's just gone.
Yeah.
Because we have centralized crime. So obviously, the vast majority of the people of the United States are largely untouched by this crime issue. It is a smaller and smaller problem than it used to be, as long as we maintain the initiatives that have led to that reduction.
Yeah.
One of them is demographics. We have a certain group which were, out of the 60s and 70s, my people, the baby boomers, which were anti-authoritarian, anti-government, which maybe tended towards a bit more criminality, a more free-spiritedness. Those people are all getting old and geriatric, and so their criminal behavior is disappearing. Simultaneously, we had local policing efforts that were begun in New York City and have spread throughout the United States, which have proven to be very effective. And they started to do the 3 strikes and you're out deal, which put 1 million people in prison, right?
Yeah.
Those people are in prison, they're not committing crimes. That's just the reality. So I think those 3 things have brought the reduction in crime.
So that makes me think of this Black Lives Matter thing, right?
BLM, baby.
So these guys are by and large, I suspect, coming from these communities, as you say, where it's been ghettoized, where they've locked down the criminal behavior to areas, and the people in these areas, I think, are screaming out in a lot of ways, hey, this, give us some attention, we need some help. But then when you go and when you look at the attention that's coming to them, so they're out there screaming for the help and they're screaming for the attention, and then you're watching people show up to help and ask and say, hey, we're here too, we're with you, and they're like, no, you can't be with us. And the mentality is so it's cross, you can't rescue, you can't aid, you can't help, because the sources that bring information to us outside of those communities. So media sources go out there and they're trying to report the actuality. Well, we're watching the actuality where these guys are denying media attention, but they're calling for media attention, and they're rioting and looting and running a cultural muck all over the hardworking, right,
Folks.
In a seeking after attention for this problem that they're having. So that's a challenge, I think, for us too, right?
And I think BLM, I give you a white boy's view on BLM, and I think it's a non-organization, because it's not centrally located. It's completely disparate everywhere you go, and they just use
cellular.
Even that. There's no coherent theme that guides the movement, save that black folk are institutionally being discriminated against, and sometimes violently, and killed, and all this sort of thing. So I think there are huge issues with the BLM movement. One, that they lack coherence. Two, they have no long-term agenda. It's hard to understand what they're trying to achieve and how they want to achieve it.
Yeah.
Though I've listened to various ones say, well, from extreme measures like we need to do away with the police. Do away with the police.
Yeah, right.
That's a very intelligent view. So you have that kind of idea, and then you've just got the people which just are filled with rage and they want to vent. So some of that's understandable.
Yeah.
You can understand, everybody feels rage from time to time. You can understand the rage when you see certain videos. Sure, it's upsetting. At the same time, people aren't willing to let the criminal justice system work in many cases. The basic idea that hands up, don't shoot meme has been proven totally false. So there are lots of things that instigated the BLM movement which lack coherence in and of themselves. And so the founding principles of that don't square within themselves. So the movement is internally dysfunctional at that basic level.
Yeah.
And the fact that people aren't willing to examine that and take at face value the idea that black people are being hunted by the police. This is the terminology that can be used. They're hunted. They're being systematically killed on the streets of everywhere in the United States by the police, whether they're black, white, didn't matter what the policeman is, but the police themselves are hunting black people, is simply not borne out by the facts. I was looking at it just the other day, and in 2015, 2016 is replicating 2015. The number of shootings by police officers in the United States is not large.
No.
It's like 1,200 shootings or deaths caused by the police.
500 and something.
Yeah, and the number that are killed, and they break down, and you got black and white, and you can break it all down. And when you get down to it, you get to something like 15 unarmed black people per annum killed by the police. And in fact, you've got more lightning deaths in the United States, 35 something per annum, people killed by lightning, than you have of these unarmed black people, black guys, black citizens shot by the police. So you have a greater chance of being hit by lightning than you do of a white cop or any cop coming up and shooting you without provocation or in a bizarre situation where you're unarmed and you're doing absolutely nothing and you're just suddenly dead. Sure, that's a horrific thing, and those cops need to go to jail. Absolutely, they need to go to jail. But the idea that 35 million black people are threatened, their lives are threatened by the nation's police force is absolutely false. Absolutely, irrevocably unfactual.
Yeah.
So it's a false meme. And I think the people that are led into that are ignorant, sometimes willfully so, and that's sad.
It upsets me sometimes to see some of it because it seems to me, and again, you know, like you're saying, you know, here's a white boy's perspective.
Right.
Well, here's my perspective too. I who am I but a single guy? But I see this series of problems being spoken of in this light that does not incorporate answers to the problem and does not seek to answer the problems. And I see these hosts of people that want us to get with a program, get onto their terms and accept their terms of things. And I am not interested in accepting those terms. And I see the behaviors that they have, and they're weak and they're not good examples of humanity. So I don't want to accept that. I don't want to support it because they're these terrible examples of humanity. And you know what I mean? And so even the guys that are reaching out to say, hey, look at what we're dealing with here, even I end up saying the cases that they speak of, and I get down on police brutality and ineffective use of force. I think that it's a horrifying thing, and it's an example of the kind of pussies we have operating in our policing forces.
Can we say that on Das
Hooah?
Hooah?
We can
Can
say,
we?
Yeah, you can say that.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
You can be,
I'm a brave new world
yeah,
here.
you
I
are
had no idea.
But that's the kind of thing that, you know, so I see that and I go, man, and I'm already down on these kinds of situations where I see this, where I see guys that really shouldn't have been doing the job, out there doing the job, and incidentally killing people who shouldn't have died.
Sure, you have the Barney Fife syndrome.
Right, you know,
Absolutely.
Terrible. Like, I'm already down on that. But then when I see guys who are like, hey, pay attention to this with me, these problems, and they offer nothing but
rage.
Nothing but terrible behavior and attitude towards things without any kind of solution or without any kind of insight into, hey, well, you know, in my experience with controlling dangerous situations in warfare or in policing situations, this is what I have seen, and this is what we can do to help train these guys, and this is what we can do as citizens who carry firearms to be able to better handle situations where people are beginning to shoot. They offer this nothing but terror, really. And when they do that, to me, it's like, man, if I was in your neighborhood and I heard the shooting and I didn't have anything else, I'd just come out and kill all of you. I'd shoot everybody. Because what the hell am I going to do? Because you're all shooting and acting like a bunch of assholes, and I'm trying to live by the law, you know, and I'm trying to live safe here. And so to me, you're all become a threat. So instead of building a positive support from guys like myself and You know, I mean, I don't know whoever else. You know, instead you're pronouncing terror and making more of it. You know, outrage over things that we can't help with because you're not even willing to accept the responsibilities to help yourself. I'll come. You want me in your? I'll come down to your neighborhood. Come on, man. Hey, man, I'll go anywhere my country sends me, man. You know what I mean? You guys need me, I'm here. I'll come down there armed. I'll kick the shit out of a bunch of gangsters. You know what I mean? I don't mind.
Well, it's a very dangerous movement because it divides the citizenry on racial lines. And I remember in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up, we watched the cities burn, and it was a horrific thing. And I do not want to see that again. You see what happened in Ferguson and Baltimore. I do not want to see that again. I want my country to prosper, and I do not want to see this racial divide. And back in the 60s and 70s, there were reasons for the demonstrations. I mean, there was true segregation. There was institutional. That means by law.
Yeah.
You had codes set up in various municipalities and states that actively discriminated against people. Yeah. Okay. That's legitimate. It's absolutely legitimate. There were people denied voting rights. That's legitimate. You can understand the rage in those cases, and you want change. Today, that does not exist. That does not exist. You have the highest cop in the land, African American. You have the President of the United States, African American. You have the entire panoply of government being governed by folks that are sympathetic to and or are black. So even in the cities that have been touched recently by these crimes, you have police forces which are mixed, but led by black men and women, right?
Yeah.
You see the chief of police come out, he's a black guy. You see the attorney general come out, she's black. You see the mayor come out, they're a black guy too. So what are we complaining about? What are we complaining about? Where does this institutionalized racism coming from? Where is it coming from? It's coming from other black folks. The cop who shoots the dude is a black guy. How does that work? How does that actually work? It makes no sense. It's not logical. And the protest, this is a problem in American society in general. We grow up with these ideas of liberty and equality, and we believe in them. We breathe that stuff. It is in our nature.
Yeah.
And and it's right that we do. But there is an inherent danger in that. And you see it manifested in all kinds of ways. And I would argue that the BLM movement is part of this manifestation. There are other things that hit this as well. Every generation coming up wants to contribute to the American experience, which means furthering the bounds of liberty, furthering the bounds of equality. And I would argue that you come up against a natural stopping point. Liberty can only go so far before it becomes anarchy. There is a dividing line between ultimate liberty and chaos. So there's a place that you cannot cross. There's a Rubicon you cannot cross without getting into extremely dangerous territory. This is the natural boundary of the two, between a lawful state and an unlawful state of being.
Yeah.
Okay? But people have this push, this desire to further, because they want to be a true American. That means making more and more the overall liberty, the overall equality in society. Same thing in equality. The equality situation, you get to a point where equality has to be forced. This is what we call Marxism. This is where you naturally have an ability. You naturally have a talent, you naturally have some focus, but no, you're not going to be able to do that because your ability is instinctively, is intrinsically superior to somebody else, and that's not equal. It is not fair. It's not fair. Why should you be able to make $10 million a year as an NBA player, and I, who am working in a steel mill, make $50,000 a year? That's not fair. I'm actually producing something. All you're doing is shooting balls in a hoop. That is fundamentally unfair just because you're 6'5" and you can dribble a ball. Fundamentally unfair. We need to stop that. Huh?
Right.
Okay, so there comes a bound in both equality and liberty where the natural progression must end. So the BLM movement is, in my view, this manifestation of something that wants to push the bounds of equality and liberty. But I would say that we are pretty well close to the end point there, at least from an institutional standpoint. The laws no longer exist to discriminate against anybody in the United States from in terms of enfranchisement, voting. We have equality under the law. The 14th Amendment has been realized. Now, sure, there are individuals who practice some kind of discrimination. But again, discrimination is a part of liberty. The ability to choose between A and B is an intrinsic part of liberty.
Yeah.
And we have this thing called freedom of expression, right? I can choose to be a jerk. I can choose to say things that are not politically correct, that are not culturally acceptable, that are offensive. Yes, I can.
Yeah.
That's my liberty. We want to curtail that because it hurts feelings, because it's not equal, because et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there are these ideas.
Well,
it comes to a point where we have to really examine where we're going. Otherwise, the result is the destruction of our republic.
That is the threat that I'm talking about. No good. It takes the intelligence out of it too. Forcing PC behavior, right? Or forcing behavior in that way, I guess, sort of takes the intelligence out of it, the ability to say, I chose this, and I freely chose these things. So it kind of disrupts the natural ability to recognize right and wrong because of the, if you're forcing it, then you're going to end up with it. You end up with the potential for even more rebellion, because it's like, well, I don't do this because it's right or wrong. I do this because you told me. And how do I know it's right or wrong? And how do you know it's right or wrong? And it gets further and further. Whereas with the freedoms that we have under, as you have mentioned, you can discover that this isn't working, this isn't right. And you can discover it yourself on an individual level, and as a society we can discover it together as we watch the cities burn on the freaking television screen.
No, I hope that doesn't continue.
I do too.
It's not good. It's not good. It's not good, and it's a false meme. I think it needs to end.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'll tell you what. That was a pretty good little conversation we just had.
I'll tell you what. Yes, sir, Bob.
Right on, Bart. Thanks for coming on, man.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Yeah, it's real good to talk with you, man.
Yep, indeed.
I missed the heck out of you. That's great.
I do as well.
Right on. Thanks for watching this conversation. I'm glad you enjoyed the show. Feel free to leave any comments with things that you liked about the show, any talking points you'd like to further converse about, and to further help contribute to the show, sign up on our Patreon page.